for us to allow to begin now with our next session and ask social media.
Yeah, it's a great honor and pleasure to me to introduce Professor Shomali to you. He is graduate of the Islamic seminaries of Cork, and he has a BA and MA in Western philosophy, and there is PhD in Manchester, so he is kind of very well informed in the Western tradition and at the same time the tradition of the religious education. So he is somebody who is building bridges, and I experienced that many times. He's very experienced in especially Shi'i Catholic dialogue. He's very well known in that context. He's working now in London at a center which is also committed to dialogue with other religions. And he wrote a lot of very interesting books. His publications include a book on self-knowledge, on ethical relativism, an introduction or even several introductions to Shia Islam, and a book on the principles of jurisprudence. So really many topics which fit also to the topic of our conference. So I'm very happy that you're here, and the floor is with you.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful. I am grateful to God for giving me this blessing of meeting my dear friends from Paderborn University and other universities in Germany here. And I also very much welcome your comments and ideas after my presentation, because I think learning is a collective process, and I always am ready to learn. I had a challenge about the topic, whether I should focus more on ethical side or a spiritual side. So I try to be comprehensive, but maybe then I couldn't focus too much on one particular area. But in discussion, we can expand on any part that you think it's more interesting to you. So what I'm trying to do is to offer a brief summary of Islamic spirituality, which I think would be acceptable to Muslims from different schools of Islam, but I am of course inspired by general Islamic references and Shia references, but I don't think this would be something that Muslims from other schools of Islam have difficulty. Actually, I think to a great part, even non-Muslims, my Christian friends would find it, acceptable. So first I started my paper with reference to an idea that I have treasured for myself, and that is about the necessity of having three things together. When I was finalizing the writing of this book, Shia Islam, Origins, Faith and Practices for Islamic College in London, in the final stage, which was about 2000, 2001, I was thinking of having a chapter in this book that would be different from ordinary presentations of Shia Islam. Because normally what we do, we have history, we have theology, we have practices. But I thought maybe my readers want to know what is the difference between Shia Islam, or what is the point of stress in Shia Islam compared to other ways of understanding Islam. So I was thinking, and then three things came to my mind, that if we have these three things together, I think this gives you an idea about the whole spirit of Shia Islam. But again, I don't say this is exclusive to Shia Islam. I think this is manifest in Shia Islam, but I think everyone can welcome this. And in December 2015, we had dialogue with the World Council of Churches in Geneva, and even our Protestant friends, welcome this idea. So it's not something necessarily Shia, but I was inspired by my own, sources. And this is one of the things that you find always repeating in interfaith dialogue, that you can be inspired by your sources or you can be inspired by sources of other people, but at the end you find that it's an idea that both of you can very well connect to and accept. So I thought there are three things that if you put them together, this gives you a kind of understanding of the spirit of Shia Islam. One is rationality. And today we have already talked about rationality, and this rationality is something that not only is rooted in the Quran and Hadith, but is also obvious in the way the Shia scholars have dealt with intellectual sciences. And this by itself is a huge area, and I don't have time to expand on this, but just might be interesting to know that sometimes when a person is not known to be Shia or not Shia, one evidence that can be used is whether he had interest in philosophy or not. Interest in philosophy can be a sign, not a decisive sign, can be an evidence that suggests that this person is more likely to be a Shia because he had interest in philosophy. Especially, today, if you go, in Iran, to every little town, if there is a university, normally there is a department of philosophy. If you go to any seminary, there are people who study philosophy. But there are some Islamic countries that from the top to the bottom, you don't find any philosophy. And they consider it as a heresy. So, rationality is very important, and in my book, I have mentioned that how our seventh Imam, Imam Qadim, in his famous hadith to Hisham ibn Hakam, he says that God has not sent the prophets and messengers except لِيَعْقِلُوا عَنِ اللَّهِ. God has sent all the prophets and messengers so that people can come to a rational understanding of God. لِيَعْقِلُوا عَنِ اللَّهِ. And then he says the best people in responding to the prophets and messengers are the people who have the better understanding, and those who have better understanding are those people who are better in their intellect. Of course, we have lots of discussion about what is intellect, but for sure this cannot be something totally different from, what we use for logic and philosophy and metaphysics. I'm not saying it's just that, but definitely that is part of it, but it's a matter of how you function it and how you implement it. So one aspect is rationality. The other aspect is search for justice. Justice is very important, and not only divine justice, but also social justice. There's a close connection between divine justice and social justice. We should not be just happy that God is just and then let injustice carry on in the society. We have to make sure that divine justice is reflected and echoed in human relations. Even in Islamic understanding of justice, justice is something that should start from within and then without. So I can be living in a cave and have no contact with any person and still be unjust. And that is to be unjust to myself. So this is where justice and righteousness come very close. Like in Christianity, we have the concept of righteousness. So here, justice is not just not to harm someone else. If I have good talents, God has given me some talents, and I don't cultivate my talents, or if I waste my time, my energy, this is also injustice. So for Shia, justice is very important, and not only they have taken justice as one of the 5 principles of their understanding of Islam, but also the history of Shia shows that how our Imams were very sensitive to the issue of injustice. And all the Shia Imams are killed. None of them died naturally or they martyred, because the tyrants and the unjust people did not find them useful for their unjust system to function. And our 12th Imam, who is the only one who has not been killed, but even according to our narrations, he would be also killed. He's in the state of occultation, and his main task, according to narrations by all Muslims, Sunni, Shia, all have the idea of Mahdi. We have some differences in some details, but all have this idea that he would fill the earth with justice and equity. So justice is very important, and also the history of Shia, is very much connected to the movement of Imam Hussein against injustice. So I don't have any time to expand on that. And the third thing is spirituality. So rationality, along with search for justice and spirituality. This is our Trinity. And I think if you have these three together, this can help you get away from extremism, radicalism, fanaticism, and also passivism, just to be indifferent. Because there are some people who are very spiritual, and when you become very spiritual, there is a tendency that you may not bother that much about what is happening in the world. Because you are too much, focused on your relation with God, and you so much enjoy your connection with God that for you the whole world is just something, that is a secondary concern. If it is any concern, it's a secondary concern. So there are many people who are spiritual, but they may not have that much interest in justice. There are people who have interest in justice, but then become very just active in, social work, political work, but they may not have even, moments of enjoying, the relation with God. Or maybe they have a spirituality and justice, but they are not that much rational. And when you are not rational in your pursuit of spirituality or justice, you can be very destructive. You can be very harmful. You can become, extremists. You can, come up with very funny understanding of religion when you are not rational. I remember several years ago, that was 2006, 2007, I was in London for my sabbatical, and some of our members of community told me, there is a person who keeps coming to our office and, ask questions, because we have some people who think that Shia are to be guided. Of course, everyone needs guidance, but some, people think that Shia are heretics and, they need to guide them. So he said, this person is coming to our office and we are not scholars. So could you also have a discussion with him? I said, if you think there is a benefit, I don't mind. So we met in someone's house, and this has remained in my mind, very fresh. He told me why the Quran doesn't mention Imama of Imam Ali. Such an important issue should be mentioned in the Quran. This is a discussion, about Imama. I said, I will give you references to this from the Quran, but before that I have a question. So just leave this question aside. Before we get into this, let us clarify our methodology. Do you believe for any principle of Islam, for any important aspect of Islam, we can only refer to the Quran? He said, yes. I said, so if Prophet today tells you that Ali is my successor, you don't accept? Then he had no answer. He said, you are using aql. They say aql, as if I'm making a crime. Aql means intellect. He said, you are using intellect. I said, what is wrong with that? So some people, of course, this is not general about non-Shia. There are many Shia who are also intellectual. But I'm saying there are some people that for them using philosophy, logic, or even, basic questions of, rationality makes them very worried and disturbed. And, he was, telling me, you are using aql. It's like someone has been drunk or someone is using weapon. He said, you are using aql. And for me, this is a credit. If someone says that you are using aql, it means that thanks to God, I'm using my reason, because Quran blames the people who don't use their reason. So, rationality and spirituality and search for justice. I think this should come together. And this is the way we should understand every aspect of Shia Islam. I remember in 2004, I went to Imam Khomeini airport. It was just opened to welcome 4 Catholic friends. We had 2 Benedictine friends and 2 people from Heathrow College, it is run by Jesuits. And unfortunately, they are closing down. So one of my Catholic friends, he's a very good scholar, Jesuit, Michael Barnes. You may know him.
He was here.
Really? Yeah. So this is after midnight. I went to the airport to welcome them. So on the way back to Qom, he said, Muhammad, what is the difference between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam? So I was thinking, what can I say, middle of the night, to him? I can talk about history, I can talk about doctrines, but I said, let me tell him these three things. So I said, for us, these three together is very important. Spirituality, rationality, and search for justice. So we talked about it on our way to Qom. Then many times I saw Michael, and he kept telling me, Muhammad, I'm thinking about those three. And last time I saw him was in American Academy of Religion in Atlanta, and he said, I'm writing a book, one chapter of it is about these three. Spirituality, rationality, and justice together. So I'm saying this in order to say that this is not necessarily a Shia thing, this can be a human thing, this can be, just rational thing, but I think something that we need to keep reminding ourselves of. Okay, so now about spirituality. So my paper is now about spirituality. And over years, I have been giving many talks on spirituality to our community, but also to many Christian friends. So normally, whenever we had Shia Catholic dialogue, we were having a presentation about spirituality from each tradition. And sometimes people invite me to talk about spirituality. So I have come up with this formula, very brief, but I am leaving this book here, Self-Development, which is published a few months ago, and this has 8 essays on spirituality. So some of the things that I'm saying here, there's an essay on it here. So I leave this book here, if anyone is interested.
As a gift for me, of course.
Sure. Spirituality is very important, thank you very much, is very important aspect of any religion. But the sad reality is that unfortunately I'm saying about myself as a religious person, sometimes we become more concerned about the rituals than the spirituality. Sometimes routines and things that we do habitually become more important. And we forget why we are doing these things. So it's very important to keep the rituals because these are bringing discipline to our life. These are like signposts to keep us reminding of God, but we should not just do rituals. In the hadith from our imams, we find an interesting idea that some people, were asking, for example, how can we judge whether a person is a faithful person or not, whether a person is good or not, whether a person is near to God or not. So we have this in our hadith that Imam said, لا تنظروا إلى طول ركوع الرجل وسجوده. Don't look at how lengthy is someone's prostration, or when he's bowing down in front of God, how much he is taking in order to say his prayer or to go to prostration. Because for us as a religious people, we quickly think that if someone is praying half an hour, 1 hour, for example, every time, maybe he's more closer to God. If someone keeps fasting every day, maybe he's closer to God. If someone keeps going to, for example, Mecca, maybe he's closer to God. Of course, I'm not saying they are not closer to God, but our Imam said this is not enough, because this can be something that they are used to it. لو تركه استوحش لذلك. This has become a habit, and if they stop doing it, they feel very bad. They feel terrible. So they do it in order to avoid feeling terrible. It's not that they do it for the sake of pleasure of God. And therefore, sometimes when something more important happens, and that is what God wants from you at that moment, they say, no, I have to enjoy my prayer. I have to enjoy my fasting. So our imams tell us that you should not be deceived, whether it be for yourself or other people, just by looking at the performance and practices. You have to go beyond and look for the spirit which is behind these actions. So this is a danger that can happen to religious people, and this can also happen to any kind of even, professions. For example, as a doctor, you have to love helping people. You have to love, your patient. But sometimes it becomes just a routine. So some doctors, just think this is the way that I make my income. This is danger. Or as a teacher, you have to enjoy helping people with education. You have to love your, class. You have to love your students. Everything becomes sacred for you. But there is a worry that sometime after a few years, it may become just something routine. So, spirituality is very important, or perhaps the most important aspect of religion. And then I have mentioned some other thing, for example, the fact that the Quran and Hadith keep reminding us that the world is not only what you see. The world is not just the material world, just the physical world. Actually, the greater part of reality is what we cannot see, what is hidden from us, the unseen world. And this is very important. And also, we are not just a physical object. We are not just body. In a poem which is attributed to Imam Ali, of course, there's a discussion with this Imam Ali or another Ali ibn Abi Talib. But the idea is very acceptable, which says, أَتَزْعَمُ أَنَّكَ جِرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِيكَ انْتَبَى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. Do you think you are a physical mass which is very small, 50 kilograms, 60 kilograms, 100 kilograms of flesh and blood, while inside you is the greatest world? According to Muslim mystics, the world around us is actually the minor world, and the world inside us is the greater world. So Al-Alamul Akbar is inside, and Al-Alamul Asghar is outside. So all these galaxies are just the minor world. So the Quran tells us about God's signs in horizons and also God's signs inside every human being. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We will show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves. And then I was thinking how I can put ideas that Muslim mystics and ethicists have offered in a framework, because there is a huge literature about spirituality. So if we want to put them together, I thought maybe we can do it like this. This is just a humble suggestion, and it's very brief, very brief. I thought perhaps we can say the very first step is wakefulness, what we call yaqza, to become awake. So definitely, no matter which school of spirituality or ethics you follow, as a Muslim you accept that heedlessness or ghafla is a big danger. When we are heedless, that's the time that we don't function properly. We don't remember what are the priorities of our life. We may waste, our life. For example, one aspect of heedlessness or ghafla is that you may invest everything in this temporary world and not saving anything for your eternal life. We have Sa'di, Iranian poet. He mentions this beautiful story. He said someone had a piece of land, and he said that I need to have a house for myself and my family. Everyone needs a house. So he did his best to make a very good house, comfortable, strong house. When the house finished, he realized that he has actually built the house in the land which is next to his own land. So he built it for someone else, and he had not built anything for himself. So it's a very good example that how we can make everything but not for ourselves. You can make lots of things and leave it for your children, or for example, or family, but nothing to take with you in your journey towards God and eternal life. So, Muslim mystics, ethicists say we have to become awake. And they are inspired by a hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he said, "An-nasu niyamun hatta idha matun tabahu." People are asleep. When they die, they become awake. But that's too late, because then you cannot do anything. Because after we die, we cannot add anything to our credit. So we have to become awake. Some people say this is the first station. Some people say this is the 0 station, because before that you have not done anything. But for sure, that wakefulness is very important. After wakefulness, the very first thing that we should do is ma'rifatun nafs, self-knowledge. We have to know ourselves. I have a book on self-knowledge. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. Otherwise, I could have left it here. But the idea of ma'rifatun nafs is so important that our Imam Ali alayhi salam says, ma'rifatun nafs anfa'ul ma'arif, is the most beneficial knowledge, to know yourself. And as Dr. Legenhausen mentioned, you may not find any book on spirituality except you find this hadith, man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord or has known his Lord. And how this beautifully is presented in the Quran by referring to the reverse relation. لا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Do not be like the people who forgot themselves, then God made them forget themselves. So knowing God leads to knowing yourself leads to knowing God. These come along and help each other. So ma'rifatun nafs is very important, but for sure ma'rifatun nafs doesn't mean to have some data like your date of birth, place of birth, your parents, your genealogy. Actually, sometimes this type of information can be actually not very helpful. We have a hadith that Rasulullah, the Prophet, saw some people gathered around a person, and they were very impressed. They said, he is very knowledgeable. Rasulullah said, what is his speciality? He said, you can ask him anything about Arab's genealogy. And he tells you your father, grandfather, great-grandfather. Then Rasulullah said, knowledge is one of the 3. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. And he mentioned 3 things that traditionally Muslims have interpreted as knowing your belief system, knowing your responsibilities, and knowing the virtues. Ayatun muhkama, sunnatun qa'ima, and faridatun adila. Rasulullah said anything other than is good, is fadl, is a merit. It's good to know, but it's not necessary. So sometimes we know things about ourselves that are good, but that is not necessary. What we mean by ma'rifatun nafs, something which is necessary and something that every person has to know. It's not for a specialist. So something about every human being can be for a specialist. But ma'rifatun nafs is something that every human being has to be equipped with. So you'll find lots of things about ma'rifatun nafs in Islamic literature on spirituality. But then after ma'rifatun nafs, for sure, we should do something. You cannot just know yourself. Ma'rifah should always lead to action, to practice. Therefore, I said after self-knowledge, we can say we have to be involved in self-care. And self-care involves self-development, but self-care is more than self-development. So, first of all, you have to care about yourself. Imagine if someone is a doctor but doesn't care about his health. Then he's not helping himself, he's not benefiting from his knowledge. If you are a doctor and you don't benefit from your knowledge of medicine, you are not helping yourself. But the problem with spirituality is that when you don't benefit from your knowledge, not only you don't help yourself, you hurt yourself more. When I know something is moral and I don't do it, I actually hurt myself. It's not just I don't benefit. It hurts me more. Therefore, we have this literature on how to improve ourselves. And here I think what we can say is agreed by everyone is that this process of self-care involves few things. For sure, part of improvement comes when you have proper understanding of yourself and your relation with God. So doctrines are very important. You cannot just be involved in spiritual practices without improving your understanding of God, especially based on the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. As I said, lots of focus is on ma'rifah. Ma'rifah is very important. And knowledge, ilm, is important, but ma'rifah is a special type of knowledge, which is specific, which is particular, which is practical, which is absorbed by your heart. Ilm can be just in mind, but ma'rifah is connection of heart and mind, which reflects itself in your practice. So this is why we say arif. We don't say alim only. We have to become arif. So arif is someone that seems he cannot disobey his knowledge. For him, there is a consistency in his personality. So one step is to improve our understanding, our ma'rifah of God, of ourselves, our beliefs. Another aspect is to make sure that we have proper actions. We perform our religious duties. And you know, in Islamic jurisprudence, for everything that we do, there is a judgment. So everything is either a matter of being obligatory or recommended or prohibited or disliked or just permissible. So if you want to get close to God, you have to observe what is obligatory, what is prohibited. Of course, there were some Sufi orders, not all, but some Sufi orders had the idea that this is for the beginners. And you know, when you reach certain level, you don't need to observe these things. You can do everything because you have reached a level that these things are not harming you. But this is not the way that we look at it. We think that the Prophet himself was observant of the Sharia. Of course, Sharia in the way which is presented by God, not in the way that some short-sighted people understand. For us, Sharia is also rational. You know, one of the sources that we use is reason. Anyway, it's very important to perform our obligatory actions to avoid from haram. And then, now we get into ethics. To be concerned about qualities of one's heart or soul. Of course, some Muslim ethicists have used Aristotelian and Greek, understanding of human faculties, how we should strike a balance in every faculty, faculty for anger, for rationality, for appetite, whatever. Some people have adopted a mystical approach. Instead of talking about virtues and vices of the faculties, they talk about the stations that a person can go through. Like, Manazil al-Sa'irin by Khaja Abdullah Ansari. Some people have tried to just be focused on the Quran and Hadith. So there are three approaches that in one of the essays here I have discussed. But no matter what approach you follow, for sure, you cannot measure success in spirituality without making sure that the person has improved the qualities of the heart. Just having proper beliefs and even proper practices are not enough. Maybe a person in practice is very careful and cautious, but he suffers greediness, selfishness, fearfulness. This shows that this person is not very much advanced. So here then we have the vast area of, mystical approach to ethics, or philosophical approach to ethics, or a scripture-based approach to ethics. And a project that I have been working in the last 2 years on was how we can come up with a hierarchical understanding of values. Because normally what we see in Muslim works on ethics is that they classify virtues and vices according to the faculties of the soul, or they classify them according to the stages of the spiritual journey, or they just bring them together. For them, there is no priority, which one should be first. So they give you a list, a comprehensive list. But I was thinking that maybe we can say that in Islam, and even in rational approach to ethics, some virtues are more fundamental. And if you manage to have them, they bring by themselves other ideas and other virtues. This is a very important concern for me. And in our series of ethics in London that I am now doing, in the last 2 years in the seminary in London, so we took this as a challenge. What would be the most fundamental value in Islam? And my argument is truthfulness. I believe truthfulness is the most fundamental value, and everything else comes from that. So we discussed about the truthfulness, and then we discussed about dignity and how dignity and honor, or karama, is originated from truthfulness, humbleness, fairness, which is very important, loyalty, all these fundamental values, how they all come from truthfulness. Anyway, this is a huge area about ethics and how we understand these virtues, how we classify them, how we prioritize them. When there are conflicts, what should we do? And then, after understanding, this will never finish, but at least after understanding what you have to do with respect to beliefs and practices and qualities, you should carry on your life with remembrance of God. Of course, everything so far mentioned is also remembrance of God, but the remembrance of God is something that starts with practices and beliefs and virtues, but does not end there. Remembrance of God is something like you have to breathe. It's something that would shape and form every aspect of your life, and every practice and every even intention should be inspired by remembrance of God. And this never ends. There is no way to graduate or retire. This is a lifelong process. Then I have tried to mention some of the outcomes of spirituality. In this series in London, I argued that we can say nearness to God, and then we try to understand what is nearness of God, is the ultimate end. But also I said we can argue that to become developed in our humanity. In Islam, there is no contradiction between this. If you are a mystic, it means that you are a good human being. And there is, this common saying in Farsi, for someone who becomes very good, we say, Adam shodan. Although we are all Adam, we are all human being, but this is different. We are actually potentially human being. Especially if we accept the idea of Mullah Sadra that we are not one species. We are, different species, and some are human beings, and some are going to be resurrected as human beings. It's not that everyone is going to be resurrected as human being. Some people may be resurrected as animals. But to develop your humanity cannot happen without getting closer to God. So I said these are two sides of the same coin. To become close to God, or to become complete in your humanity. The maximum progress of humanity is to become vicegerent of God, of course. or to actualize to be image of God. Because there is a way to say every human being is an image of God, but there is a way to say that this is potential. Every human being is created in the way that is potential in the image of God, but still not a fulfilled image of God. So this is also a discussion that I leave it for another time. And then I have mentioned some virtues that I think are very important in addition to truthfulness. And I would like to mention only one. And that is love. I'm sure everyone who has read something about Islamic spirituality finds that love is very important for Muslim mystics and spiritual masters. Love is the core of spirituality. What is important in Islam, and we find it in many hadiths from Ahlul Bayt, from the household of the Prophet, is that love for God is not enough. Many people think that we should love God and make our heart full of love for God. This is true, but this is not the end of the story. What we find is that love for God should grow into loving for the sake of God. So Hubbullah is not enough. Al-Hubbu fillah is what we have to achieve. So if someone says, my heart is full of love for God, but he doesn't bother about other human beings, about even animals and birds, he is not a true lover of God. He has not understood what is God. So a true love for God would put you in connection with everything but through God, not next to God. We would not have anything to love next to God or independent from God. Imam Hussein said in Dua Arafah, Ilahi anta alladhi azalta al-aghyar an qulub ahibba'ik hatta lam yuhibbu sibak. You are the one who removed others from the hearts of his lovers so that they don't love anything other than him. So they don't love anyone other than God, but then under God, they love everything. And this is, I think, something that is not just a spiritual matter or something that, for a specialist. I think this is something that we very much need today. And I think today, unfortunately, we have people that have no experience of love for God. It's a problem in the world. Maybe never in the world we had so many people who have no love for God or faith in God. So many atheists today, as percentage, I think, is very high. But also we have this problem with some people who love God. You can say, how? Can someone who loves God be a problem? I say, yes. Depending how they love God. Some people love God in the way that they want to possess God. This is dangerous. If you love God in the way that you love your car or your house, your bank account, this is dangerous. Because then you try to have monopoly over God. You would not want anyone to have any share in God, and you also put your selfish ideas in the mouth of God. You say, God tells me to kill you. God tells me to destroy your places of worship. Which God is telling you to kill other people if they belong to another religion or another denomination? Which God? This is self-projected God. This is the ego of a human being or a group of people or a gang or party or tribe that in order to be possessed by God, they bring God to the level of God of a person or a tribe, and then whatever they want to say and they feel embarrassed to say, this is what I want, they say, God says this. Quran says this, Bible says this, But this is this person's ego. And this is the problem. Therefore, I always emphasize that the sign of a spirituality is how much you are able to open yourself for others. Because if you are getting closer to God, this should show itself in the openness of your heart, in the love and care and concern that you have for other people. But if you remain very selfish, an egoist person, then you cannot claim that you have gone closer to God. So, if someone goes higher and higher towards God, he should be able to have godly vision. But if God is brought down, then God would have a personal or tribal, understanding. I stop here, so I hope what I said was beneficial, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Shomali.